session that will be all about building an inclusive workplace. My name is Nelly Verlinden. I will be your host today. I hope, of course, that everyone is doing well. And I'm being joined today by two amazing people whom I will introduce to you shortly. But first, let me give you a little bit of context as to why we are having this conversation today. Inclusion is often, if not always, mentioned alongside diversity and equity. But what does inclusion really mean? What does a truly inclusive workplace look and feel like? And how can organizations make progress towards that? Now, this and more is what we will be talking about today with two people who are experts on DE&I, and each of them live on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. So we will have both a European and American perspective. Perhaps they are different, perhaps they are similar. We will find out in a bit. So now, without further ado, let me introduce to you our two fantastic guests, starting with Vivian Acquah, who is joining us from the Netherlands here in Europe. And Vivian is an inclusive workplace wellness and Amplify DEI advocate. And she's also a consultant, speaker, and strategist. Hi, Vivian.
Hi, Nelly. I'm so excited to be here. So thank you for having me as well.
I am super happy to have you, Vivian. And our second guest today is Steve Yacovelli. And Steve is a speaker, author, and catalyst, helping people be more consciously inclusive leaders. And he also is the owner of TopDog Learning, and that is an learning and development consulting firm. Hi, Steve. I believe I should say good morning to you, shouldn't I?
We just reached afternoon, but hello, it's good to see you, and good to see you again, Vivian.
Nice to see you too, Steve.
Yes, because I know that the two of you have been working together, or you have been speaking together before. So I think that should be interesting to hear your views on the topics that we are going to talk about today. I think we can get started right away. And the first thing that I'd like to touch on is inclusion. I mean, in your view, what does inclusion really mean? And I'd like to start with you first, Vivian.
Inclusion for me, that means that the individual, so the employee or everybody within the company, feels like they are part of the big whole cake that a company is making. I have to talk about food, so I'm always sharing a warning, but everybody wants to be part of the amazing carrot cake. And inclusion is where your heart belongs. It's like creating a second family within the company. It's also like creating the ohana aspect within the company. So to me, that's what inclusion is all about.
Thank you. Steve, what's your view on this?
Very much agree with what Vivian said. When I first got into this space, was actually at Disney. I was an internal consultant doing leadership and diversity consulting. And my mentor said it the best way, kind of along the same lines. She said, diversity is being asked to the dance, where inclusion is being asked to dance. So it's the active part of it. And then I would actually even add the concept of belonging, which is I, as the dancer, the employee, will dance however the heck I want, and everyone's totally okay with that. That's kind of how I look at those perspectives.
Yeah, fantastic. I think we've got two really nice analogies here. One, we have for the food lovers, we have the comparison with the carrot cake or any other kind of cake you like. And on the other side, for the people who love to dance, we have the comparison with the dance. Yeah, I like
very
it.
Inclusive
Thank
of
you so
all
much.
of us. Very inclusive of all of us. Actually.
Definitely.
Absolutely. Now, from inclusion as being basically the definition of the word inclusion, I'd like to go, of course, to the workplace, because that's one of the things that we are going to be talking about today. Starting perhaps with you this time, Steve, what does it mean, or what does it look like to be an inclusive workplace?
There's a lot of different ways that an inclusiveness can manifest itself into the modern workplace. It could be things big and small. It could be little things like, as you see, Vivian and I adding our pronouns as a way to share an inclusive virtual space, if you will. It could be bigger things like, what do my marketing materials look like to the external? What do my onboarding materials look like to an internal or new prospects within the business? So it's just being mindful that our perspective probably isn't the only one, and really reaching out as a business, as an organization, to make sure that all those different perspectives are taken into account to foster that sense of belonging.
Yeah, I agree, because also what I wanted to add, what Steve just now shared, is having the right toolkits for people to be able to provide, to work on inclusiveness, right? Because most of the times people tend to look upon the leaders, they tend to look upon legal or maybe the HR department. Show me what it means like to be inclusive. Show me what I can do to be inclusive. But I want to rather encourage people to start with their self-education, or start with, what can I do today to become more inclusive? What can I do today to create an inclusive workplace? It doesn't mean that you have to change the culture one day at a time. It means like, what can you do from yourself as a self-leader to create that environment where your team members feel welcome, to create that environment where other people feel welcome within your company? That's what I want to challenge people with today.
Yeah, I really like that, Vivian. And to be honest with you, this is one of the things that I've written down to ask both of you today, because of course a lot of the time we talk about what can companies do, what can a certain industry do, what can HR do. But one of my questions indeed was going to be, okay, but what can I do as an individual? Because I'm convinced that we can all play our part in this. But we'll touch on that a little bit later again. But thank you so much for already bringing it up. Fantastic. What I'd like to do here as well, perhaps we can look at a few characteristics of an inclusive workplace. So Steve already mentioned things that I think we can link to the way that you communicate as an organization, the way that you communicate also from an HR or policy perspective. So perhaps that is one element, one characteristic of an inclusive workplace. Can we have a few more? Can we find a few more characteristics? You know, I love lists. People love lists. So maybe we can find a few characteristics. What are your thoughts on that?
I think you can look at the demographic makeup, especially of that senior leadership. Are they representative of the greater population? And if they're not, are there steps in place to make it so? I work with a lot of actually European-based companies, and I know they're really struggling with, they look at their senior executives and it's all white dudes, and they're trying to be like, well, what can we do to make it not so? Because when we're a global company, and when we look beyond, say, Germany, there's a lot of different people out there, and so the C-suite may not be there. That's fine, but are there steps to get those? Both the senior leadership as well as the middle managers to better reflect the true demographics of society?
Yeah, that is a really important one, I think, Steve. Vivian, do you have any input on this?
Yes, definitely. I always feel like you need to practice what you preach. So if you are showcasing inclusive images, you have to start from the inside out by working towards transparency, or creating or stating that we are working towards inclusivity. We need your support, but we are starting from this level and we want to include our people as well. If you are not practicing what you're preaching, that's where the calling out comes from, or so many negative news that I've seen lately where people don't feel like they are part of the equation. I want people to be seen for the values that they bring, for the superpowers that they have, and not their skin color, their religion, or their sexual orientation, because those are side superpowers, I would guess, or side dishes that make somebody feel special in total. Judge us by our superpowers and amplify our superpowers so that they can make, your company feel great, do great, and become innovative.
I find that very interesting when you say that, Vivian, because would that mean then that perhaps we would have to start thinking about hiring differently?
Oh, definitely. Don't get me started on that equation.
Okay.
There is so much in that level regarding the AI part of recruiting and hiring people. I want people to be seen for the superpowers that they have, not with the color of the skin or the sexual orientation. So my preference is do it anonymously. Mm-hmm. Do it anonymously, not with a tool, but hire people and have different people in the hiring committee or different people in the interview process so that you lower the biases and teach people about the bias. So don't do a one night stand training about unconscious bias and think that it's done. Challenge each other to challenge each other from time to time. Am I right to think this way? What kind of bias is hindering me for becoming more inclusive? Let's challenge each other. Let's stop doing the one night stand thing, because that is in another category and it should not be in this whole diversity, equity, inclusive world.
You swipe left. Absolutely. Exactly right. There was a really, really interesting story done where I forget which Philharmonic it was here in the States, but they realized, they were completely out of balance with gender.
Exactly.
And you know this, it's kind of like now there's TV shows that do this with The Voice and stuff here in the States, where they put screens up, and so the judges only heard the performance of the musicians, not anything else. And, it's those types of strategies that really can go far with creating a more inclusive workplace. I know, AI is great. Excuse my eye. AI is great, but it's only as good as the programmers who did it. And so, really, like Vivian said, second guessing what's happening, who's done it, having those divergent perspectives look at it is the best way to start to get as much bias out of our workplace as we can. It won't totally go away, but at least to start there.
Yep, absolutely. I totally agree.
Me too, which means that we can move on. Thank you. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is inclusive leadership. Now, we briefly mentioned it, that of course, leadership plays a super important role when it comes to building an inclusive workplace. But what exactly, in your opinion, is inclusive leadership? I think, Steve, I'm going to start with you this time, since I mentioned that also as part of your introduction, but perhaps you can share your thoughts on that first.
Yeah, the way I try to position it with leaders is that being inclusive is a running thread throughout everything that they do. And I use the kind of the model of think in, speak up, and act out as a smart, consciously inclusive leader. So, and Vivian already hit the first one. It's thinking in. It's about me first as a leader. So where are my unconscious biases? What are the things that I'm doing and not doing that's being inclusive or exclusive? And then you kind of move to the next layer out, which is looking around me, my immediate area of focus. So it could be my team, it could be my department, but how are we behaving? What are the norms of our interactivity? And is that being inclusive? And is also including inclusive language that's not like putting people on the defensive or being part of those out groups? Is it mitigating silent collusion within the way we work together? And then the bigger part is actually what we've been talking about is looking at the broader part of the organization. As a leader, that's my job too. And so what are we doing in my business processes and in my sphere of influence? What can I help influence outside of that to make sure that our workplace is really bringing the concept of being consciously inclusive to top of mind in all that we do?
Definitely. Steve gave a lot away, but I will bring in a different perspective. So I use my son a lot. My son is 7, and I learn from my son a lot. My son is 7, and I am going to share something about inclusive leadership. So starting with yourself. I learned from Pokemon that Pokemon evolve into the next level. So I'm going to use Charmander in this case, right? Charmander is a fire Pokemon, and Charmander starts as a self-leader, getting to know themselves, getting to learn what they can do to become more inclusive. The next stage that Charmander goes into is the next level of inclusive leadership. That's what the characteristic that Steve shared right now, that's where you fit in. But I want us to level up to, I think it's Charmeleon, the ultimate level of Charmander. And that is becoming an ally, becoming a true, authentic ally. We see so many performative allies saying something and not stepping up promising something, but not stepping up. And that's where the disappointment comes from. So I challenge people towards action, and I want to challenge people to learn more about what it means to become an ally. And an ally is not about you getting a brochure about, yes, I'm the best ally. An ally is somebody who speaks up for those who can't. An ally is somebody who is transparent about what he's doing, what he or she or they are doing. An ally is someone who educates themselves, but also challenges others to do better. I want us all to become allies and to be real when it comes to this work that we're doing.
Yeah, beautiful. Wow, you both leave me speechless sometimes, because this was again such a nice compliment to what each of you have been saying. So thank you so much for that. I'm just really enjoying this while I'm listening to both of you.
You're welcome.
And then also, again, I love what you were saying, Steve, about the think in, speak up, act out. And then I definitely love what you said as well, Vivian, with the Pokemon coming into play and the allies, and the allies actually doing what Steve was saying as well, as in like, speaking up, acting out, but also for others who can't.
Yep.
Absolutely love it. Now, I'd like to look at some organizations, if we can. You don't need to name any names, but organizations who are doing things the right way, perhaps organizations that you've worked with or worked at, and maybe some good examples of what they are doing to make progress. Steve, maybe starting with you.
Happily start. I'm very fortunate. I have a lot of the clients that we work with, they're pretty far down their inclusive and sense of belonging path, which is great. And we might come in and help tweak some things here and there. But one of the things that I see, and I have a bunch of pharmaceutical clients. I don't know how. I'm not a pharmacist in any way, but just kind of happens that way. And most of them, as an example, really leverage their employee resource groups in a fantastic way. Affinity groups, business resource groups, they go by different names, but the demographics of employees that get together and help foster inclusivity in maybe one specific way, or hopefully beyond that, talking about our allyship. And the smart businesses that I'm seeing, yes, they have their ERGs, but they leverage them beyond hey, it's blank month, let's celebrate. And they do things like, how can they be that consulting group to help educate the senior executives on whatever's needed, especially when things are timely and things of that nature. They're using them to help disseminate and educate allyship, whatever that looks like within the business. And then they're leveraging them to really be that outsource, that outreach to other events that are happening to show the inclusiveness of their workplace. And that's going to attract great talent and all that good stuff. And so it's not the tick box, yay, we have ERGs, let's move on. It's really leveraging the power that they bring to really impact the business.
I love what you shared, Steve. And also, from my perspective, I cannot name names because of the NDA that I have to sign, but I do have, what I can share is the companies, the fintech, the tech companies that hire me. Some of them are starting a mentoring group. And with mentoring, for me, mentoring personally, we have to step up. We have to level it up. We have to Pokemonize it and create that sponsorship. So I challenge these companies to really think about what can they do to sponsor somebody if that person has a dream to become the next leader within 5 years. What tools are you implementing so that they can become that next leader? We need to, again, challenge each other to support each other with the commitments, because some people from underrepresented groups, they already, the playing field isn't leveled. So they already have that, how do you say it? That different, settings, different starting point as in to other people that already have the networks, that already are in some conversation or already are invited to some events. So I challenge them to bring somebody else in so that they can be seen, they can be heard, and they can be noticed. We need to level up. So if you can invite somebody who doesn't look like you, speak like you, talk like you, invite them to do better, invite them to an event. Yep. And this goes for offline and online as well.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I would,
Thank you.
I would also add, one thing, bringing it to kind of contemporary COVID times. One thing that I've seen work really well for some of the businesses, the clients that I play with, is that they figured out or are figuring out a way to still foster a sense of inclusion and belonging in these weird times, whether that be virtual social items, allowing people to continue that work from home, even though things are hopefully getting a little bit different around the world, and really still trying to foster that sense of team and connectedness through the technology means and the situation from the distance remote working. And I think that's going to keep going. We took one of our face-to-face workshops that was in being an inclusive leader and turned it into four different modules. And I guess this is the benefit of having a doctorate in instructional technology and distance ed, because I'm really using it a lot these days. But the one client, which I thought was really, and we didn't think about this as the benefit, because normally me or my team would go to their sites throughout, we just cover North America, and then there's folks in Europe that do the stuff here. But when we started doing these workshops, they just had everybody in North America come. So we had people all over Canada, US, some folks from Mexico, and now we have 30 of people within their company that never would have met each other. And we were so excited about that. Like, wow, that's a really cool byproduct that we didn't think about because before it was just kind of in their campuses or hubs. And I think we're going to have more of that. And smart businesses are going to keep having more of that to foster that sense of belonging and inclusiveness throughout their enterprise.
Yeah, as long as you add fun and food and serious conversations, then nothing can go wrong. I definitely can emphasize on that as well. Yeah.
And dancing, don't forget dancing. Although that can be also that can be under the fun category, of course. But exactly. so can food. This is something I was indeed wondering about, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Of course, we've touched on it now a little bit, but the impact of COVID and the increase in remote work that we've seen, do you feel that has had an impact on organizations' inclusion efforts? Can be positive, can be negative. I mean, Steve gave quite a positive example just before, but what are your thoughts on that? Vivian, I'm going to start with you now.
I know that what COVID has done, it has exposed how good companies are doing regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it has also shown the other side, how bad companies are doing when it comes to those topics. It has also shown us that everybody is facing this storm in a different way. Some people are in a rubber boat. Some people have an amazing yacht where they can still, take a trip to San Jose or whatever. I'm talking to the influencers right now with the budget. But besides that, we have to be very mindful where people are. You're now in their homes, where some people don't even have their own room to be having these conversations, or have toddlers, or have their kids running around, or are being homeschooled. We have to know our people and simply ask them, how can I support you? And how can we support each other as a team? That's an essential question. Instead of asking, how are you doing? Because that question is out of scope. Definitely from 2021. Ask the deeper questions instead of, how are you doing?
Yeah. No, I totally agree.
I've
been one of the things that me and my team always do is, to Vivian's beautiful point, it's what can I do to help you today? And putting the today on it, because next Friday, next Monday, next whenever, I could be in a completely different space. And the other thing that we were kind of talking about, actually my team meeting earlier today, was it's what's going to happen after COVID with these experiences. And to Vivian's point, that you're seeing in Zoom or whatever you're using, little windows into everybody's world, whether we like it or not. Where in the workplace, I would let you see what windows by a picture or some artifact or whatever, but now you're actually seeing it happen. Seeing a 7-year-old with Pokemon cards behind you or something like that, and that's I think a beautiful thing. And I think it's developing a lot of empathy, and I'm hoping that carries through, because when we're all on the other side of COVID, I truly believe the workplace is going to be completely different. And if we're paying attention and learning, we're going to pull those best parts out about it. And to Vivian's awesome point, we're also going to continue to shine the light on the things that aren't working so that we can fix them and make them more equitable and foster that belonging for all of us.
I really like what you said as well, Steve. And actually, it was, again, something that was a bit of a collaboration between what Vivian was saying and what you were saying. But I like what you said, what can I do for you today? I really like that little one-word addition. That really makes all the difference, I think. So beautiful. Now, as I said in the introduction, we were going to talk as well about how can organizations get started with being more inclusive workplaces. Now, that's what I'd like to touch on right now, is how can they get started? Perhaps we can, give them just a few simple tips, things they can do. We touched on some of them already, but perhaps let's say 3 things if companies want to really start moving things as from tomorrow. How do we get started?
Okay, I'll share it from the European lens. Here in Europe, the conversation is different. So we are at a point, especially the companies that are based from Europe and are created in Europe. We are still at the conversation of what is diversity, what is equity, what is inclusion. I don't want to say that it is bad, because it's important to start with these definitions before you go engage in the difficult conversation, or before you go towards the other topics. However, I am also engaging with international companies where we are open to have conversations about race. We are open to challenge people to become allies. I just want you to start from where you are at, include your people, include whatever it is that they want to work on, because you cannot start the D&I conversations without including your people, and ask them, what are your top 3 things that you want to engage in? What are your top 5 things that you want to engage in? And then work towards that. We can use other figures as benchmarks, but know that what a company XYZ has done doesn't mean that you can just copy paste it. Pizza number A isn't the same pizza from the real pizza in Italy. Yes, I'm like that. I always use food, but we have to be honest and open about ourselves. We cannot compare ourselves with Facebook or the Google if you don't have those budgets.
Yeah.
No. I think that's a very, very good point indeed, Vivian. And then, of course, I'm now very curious to hear, let's say, the US perspective, Steve.
Well, I would think that with the folks that I work with, it starts with the organizational values. And so whether they're a big or small company, whether you're like a mom and mom or pop and pop shop, as we say in the States, or, small or big, whatever, what are the values that you want your business to be? And, you often see, especially large organizations, somewhere in there is something about being inclusive. Fantastic. So now we have values. Are they real? I mean, are they the ones that are lived, or are they beautiful website marketing fodder? And that takes a lot of courage to do that self-analysis. But I think once you have that situated where it's pretty solid, that these are our values and this is what this is what we really do honor, then it's holding everybody accountable to those values. And I've worked with a lot of leaders over the years, and you can tell there's some people who really don't align with their organizational values. And I like a little tough love, because I say, have a conversation with yourself. You're not an indentured servant to this organization. You have choices. And yes, you might like the paycheck, the security, whatever. But if your values and the organizational values aren't in line, you're not going to do anybody any good. And so what I'm seeing organizations do is almost, I just envision a tree, and they're shaking the tree to see what falls out through the lens of those inclusive values. And then the other thing I'm seeing and suggesting is, have some sort of plan, and don't have part of that plan make the minority groups, whatever that definition is, be the one pulling the brunt of the education effort. Because, as the queer boy, I'm kind of tired of talking about, what LGBTQ+ means and all that fun stuff. Actually, I am happy to do it. But there's some of our brothers and sisters who are on this fight who it's like, oh, you're the black or brown person. You can have this conversation. No, don't do that. Really bring in that diverse opinion and perspective, and don't put the burden of education on the different others of us out there.
Yeah, because I also want to build upon what Steve just shared right now. You have to realize that the people from the underrepresented groups, they already have a lived experience. Some can be very traumatic. And for them to be put in a position where they have to relive that, relive that occasion, relive that experience without therapy or without anything attached to that. Be mindful. Ask them if they want to involve themselves in creating an ERG group, or ask them if they want to be part of the committee, but also be respectful of the fact that they sometimes have to say no because it's too up close and personal. And the work that we are doing, it is mentally draining. It can be mentally draining, but you have to give people the toolkits to recharge themselves, as I do. And I totally believe that Steve does as well, because it is a lot of people work, and there goes so much energy, so much gratitude, but humbleness. But there is also another side regarding that. And I also want to challenge companies to, yes, you show the love when you hire people or when you go looking for people. I want you to renew your vows after the 90 days, after the 180 days, after that year. See that, that yearly setup that you have with your car, where you check if the oil is good or if the battery is good. Have that same check-in for your people and renew your vows. Not literally, but you get what I'm saying.
No, and to just piggyback on Vivian's point, measurement is a massive thing, and I don't see it done by even the bigger companies that I work with. I'm a nerd. I love data. Anytime we're a learning company, we're a change management company, because we want to measure the impact for us. It's learning and communication strategy and all that. And people who tick boxes, you're not really measuring the impact. What about, sure, you might have one question on that annual employee engagement survey, but what are you doing with that data? What are you doing constantly to ask, how inclusive are we, friends? Are we doing it? I love Vivian's, do we need to renew our vows? If so, let's do that. And really having that active part of it, and this is why I use the phrase consciously inclusive, because it really needs to continue to be top of mind, not just on blank month or when something happens like George Floyd, but it has to be that conversation throughout the existence of the organization if it's really going to be part of its essence.
It sometimes seems like we go to the gym expecting that miraculously we lost the weight or we gained the muscles, but the same goes for the work within DEI. You have to train continuously. You have to work on doing better. That's the same for every relationship that you go on. So treat the work within DEI, treat that you are embarking a relationship, you're dating with your people, you're evolving the relationship, and every time you touch base and check in, what do we need to do? What do we need to tweak? How can we do better? And yes, you might fall, but the important part is that you learn from that experience and do better the next time.
Yes. Now, while listening to both of you and thinking of how can organizations get started, a few things come to mind. One, it seems when we talk about organizations have to take a look at where they're at right now, ask people through, for instance, a survey. I hear self-analysis. I think this can be something that is quite difficult for organizations. So would you say that it might be handy? Of course, there are budgets involved here, but it might be a good idea if the budget is there for organizations to get somebody from outside the organization who has, of course, a different pair of eyes in terms of how they look at their. I know, and I don't want to make any kind of like advertising here, but this is an actual question, because this is such an important topic. I think it's super difficult for organizations to really look at themselves, let's say, as objective as possible. So is this doable? Is it even doable for, I don't want to be negative here, but is it doable for organizations to do it by themselves? Or would you say, at least to get started, they should, if possible, get guidance? Vivian, let's start with you.
I would say a surgeon should not operate on himself or herself or themselves. See what you're doing as a surgeon. So if you want to specialize or do better and really do it better in a professional way, hire Steve or hire me or hire other, fellow advocates who have the credentials to do better. And also we have seen different companies from different lenses. We can bring that expertise in and make your company look better. We cannot solve all the challenges. That's also something that I would have to admit, but we can support you in solving those challenges as well.
And I would add to Vivian's point, in a sincere way. I've been approached by companies who want to hire TopDog services to be more inclusive, but really it's a tick box. And that's not how I want to be. We want to be there, ask the hard questions, be with those senior executives to say, why are you doing this? Why are you all big white dudes? Or whatever is the right word. And really help them see things in a better, more inclusive manner. But if it's tick box training, I just literally had an email last week for tick box training. Existing client referral said, hey, we had an incident at one of our plants. Are you comfortable sending one of your people to train? I said, 1, no, COVID. 2, more importantly, this is not I love Vivian's analogy of the gym because I actually use that same one as well. We're not going to go and have one workout and all of a sudden you're going to be Johnny Atlas fitness person. Like that's not how it works. And so, I said, however, if you want to think about a strategy that we can do on an ongoing basis for this one particular site and measure it, absolutely, let's talk. And I think that objective way, I don't ever want to be, there's a fantastic book called The Trusted Advisor, Masters, Green, and Galford. It's a really cool way to look at you as a consultant, as an external. And the bottom layer is service provider, trade in, trade out. The top layer is trusted advisor, where people call and ask those hard questions and we give the hard answers. And it may not lead to any sort of tangible statement of work, but they go away and do their thing and then they come back for more. And that's where we want to sit, because those are the types of organizations that are really trying to make that difference. And I think that's the nice place to be, if you will, as an external.
And besides, stop tapping on the food again. You cannot expect a company to copy a Michelin star without inviting the Michelin star chef, right? You want to bring in the experts so that they can support you and not invent the wheel that was already invented anyway. Have that. Think about that and stop wasting money. And time and energy and productivity and so much more.
and the list goes on. But yes, well, thank you so much again. I cannot believe you guys are so good at complementing each other, and then there's valuable things. So fantastic. Time-wise, however, we are down to the last round of this conversation with you both today. And Vivian has been doing it quite a bit already, because I really love to leave the people listening or watching with a challenge for each of them on an individual level. So Vivian can think about, maybe she still has a lot more challenges, but she can think about another one that she hasn't mentioned yet, perhaps. And then Steve, I'd like to start with you. What challenge would you like, indeed, each of us like to leave with when it comes to,
I was going to say, I would challenge every single person listening, watching, learning, to go back to your workspace, whatever that looks like, and really take a look around and think about the 3 things that could be more inclusive, whether that be honoring people who don't want to turn their cameras on for whatever reason during your distance meetings, or those people who maybe don't turn them on and see if they can be more inclusive. What are just 3 things you can immediately look at and take action on right now to foster a little bit more of an inclusive workplace for your particular people?
I want to challenge, I love that. And I want to challenge people to remove their fears. And if they have any challenges regarding the conversations that they want to be had, I mean, there are amazing people sitting at this desk already that can support you in having those conversations, because we should not be letting us hold back by fear. We need to keep the conversations moving because our demographics are changing, the clienteles are changing, the companies are changing. And the last thing that you want to do is your company becoming a dinosaur because you don't really want to have these conversations regarding diversity, equity, inclusion. We have to start somewhere and we have to have these uncomfortable conversations, but sometimes you do need guidance. Sometimes you do need a mediator to have these conversations.
Thank you. Very strong way to end this fantastic conversation. Now I have one last thing. Vivian, if people want to connect with you, where can they best do that?
The best place is connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm very open-hearted, and also know that I host frequent live shows. I won't say every week, but frequent live shows where I challenge people to humanize the workplace. So what can we do? I'm all about what can you as the individual do to make the workplace a little bit better so that everybody feels like they are included in the conversation and can eat their cake as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Now let's go to Steve. Steve, if people want to connect with you, where and how can they best do that?
Yeah, the best place is for one-stop shopping, if you will, is our main website, topdoglearning.biz, B-I-Z. There you can see me, my team, the online and face-to-face training products we offer. You can see more about the books I have, including my latest one, Pride Leadership, Strategies for the LGBTQ Plus Leader to be the King or Queen of their Jungle. And there's also ways to connect and say, hey, let's have a chat, Steve. Let's grab a virtual coffee and just get to know each other. My calendar is always there, and it's open for anyone.
Fantastic. Okay, that leaves me then one last time with a big thank you to both of you for joining me. I really enjoyed this conversation. So thank you so much, Steve. Thank you so much, Vivian.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was awesome.
That's the chorus. I love it.
And thank you everybody for listening and watching. Goodbye.